The red and blue emergency lights cast eerie shadows across Sara's face as she knelt on the wet pavement, cradling the trembling body of her K9 partner. Bella's breath came in ragged bursts, her once alert eyes now clouded with pain. Blood seeped through Sara's fingers as she pressed them against the German Shepherd's side, her own tears falling unnoticed in the rain. "Stay with me, girl," Sara whispered, her voice breaking. "We've survived worse, remember?" But as the ambulance screamed toward them, Sara knew something had irreversibly changed. This wasn't just another injury. This was the end of everything they had built together, the final mission they would ever face as partners. The decision she was about to make would alter both their lives forever. 3 years later, Sara Matthews stood at the window of her isolated lakeside cabin, watching the rain create rippling patterns across the water's surface. At 42, the former K9 unit officer had traded her badge and uniform for solitude and silence. The cabin, nestled among towering pines in the mountains of Colorado, had become both her sanctuary and her prison. The nightmares had come again last night. Vivid replays of that final raid, the ambush, the gunfire, and Bella's agonizing cry as the bullet tore through her body. Sara's hand instinctively moved to her own scar, a jagged line along her left shoulder, a permanent reminder of what they had both lost that night. Sara turned away from the window and reached for the bottle of whiskey on the counter. It was barely noon, but time had lost its meaning in this self-imposed exile. The cabin walls were bare, except for a single framed photograph. Sara and Bella in their police uniforms, both standing proud and alert, medals gleaming on their chests. "To us," Sara muttered, raising her glass to the photograph. She had no idea where Bella was now. After the shooting, the department had retired the injured K9 and placed her with a rehabilitation specialist. Sara, battling her own physical and psychological wounds, had been unable to fight for custody. By the time she had recovered enough to try, Bella was gone, adopted out to an unknown family, and all records sealed for the dog's protection. The loud knock on her door startled Sara so badly that she dropped her glass, sending whiskey and shards across the wooden floor. No one ever came here. That was the point of buying a cabin at the end of a forgotten dirt road. Another knock, more insistent this time. Sara's police instincts kicked in. She moved silently to the small table by the door where she kept her personal weapon, loading it with practiced efficiency before cautiously approaching the entrance. "Who is it?" she called, her voice rough from disuse. "Captain Reynolds. Sara. Open up." Sara's breath caught in her throat. Reynolds had been her commanding officer, a man she hadn't spoken to since her resignation 3 years ago. With shaking hands, she unlocked the door. Reynolds stood on her porch, rain dripping from his coat. Behind him was a woman Sara didn't recognize, holding a leash that disappeared behind the captain's legs. "What is this?" Sara asked, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. Reynolds stepped aside, revealing a German shepherd with graying muzzle and wary eyes. The dog had a prominent scar running down her right flank, a mark Sara would recognize anywhere. "Bella?" Sara whispered, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. The German shepherd's ears perked at the sound of her name, her head tilting as she studied Sara's face. There was no joyful recognition, no excited barking, just cautious observation, as if trying to place a half-remembered scent. "Her current handler passed away unexpectedly," Reynolds explained. "She's been at the shelter for weeks. No one wanted to adopt an older police dog with trauma issues. When they scanned her chip, our department was alerted." The woman holding the leash, who introduced herself as Meredith from the county animal shelter, spoke softly. "She's not the same dog you knew, Officer Matthews. She doesn't work anymore. Loud noises terrify her. She refuses most commands, and she's been diagnosed with canine PTSD. The department thought you might want to know, given your history." Sara stared at Bella, taking in the graying muzzle, the dull coat, and the wary stance, so different from the confident, powerful canine she had worked alongside for 5 years. Bella stared back, her amber eyes revealing nothing. "We thought you might want the opportunity to see her," Reynolds said carefully, "before we make other arrangements." The implication was clear. An aging K9 with severe behavioral issues had few options left. Sarah's mind raced. She was in no condition to care for herself, let alone a traumatized police dog. Her cabin was too small, her life too broken, her own wounds too raw. Taking Bella would be a mistake, another burden she couldn't possibly bear. "I'll take her," Sara heard herself say, the words escaping before she could stop them. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" "She's not easy, Sara. She needs specialized care." "I said I'll take her." This time, Sarah's voice was firm, even as doubt clouded her mind. As Meredith transferred Bella's leash to Sarah's hand, the dog remained motionless, neither resisting nor acknowledging her former handler. When their fingers briefly touched, Sara noticed that Bella's tail gave a single, almost imperceptible wag, the smallest gesture of what might have been recognition. The decision had been made. Two broken warriors, reunited against all odds. What Sara didn't know as she led Bella into the cabin was whether this reunion would heal their shared wounds or deepen them beyond repair. The first night was a disaster. Sara had prepared a bed for Bella in the living room, near the fireplace, but the German Shepherd refused to lie down. Instead, she paced the small cabin, her nails clicking on the wooden floor as she investigated every corner, every scent. When Sara tried to approach, Bella backed away, her body language stiff and defensive. "It's me, girl," Sara whispered, holding out her hand. "Don't you remember?" But Bella kept her distance, eventually retreating to the farthest corner of the room where she stood facing the wall, her body trembling slightly. Sara slept on the couch that night, or tried to. Every time she closed her eyes, the memories flooded back. Bella as a young recruit, excelling in training, the countless drug busts and missing person searches they had conducted together, the unspoken connection that had made them the department's most effective K9 team. Dawn found both of them exhausted. Sara made coffee while Bella watched from her corner, having barely moved all night. The dog hadn't touched the food or water Sara had set out. "Fine," Sara muttered. "We'll do this your way." She ignored Bella for the rest of the morning, going about her routine, what little there was of it, as if the dog weren't there. She refilled her own coffee, made a half-hearted attempt at breakfast, and finally settled in her armchair with a book she had no intention of reading. Around noon, she noticed Bella had moved. The German Shepherd now lay near the door, her head on her paws, eyes fixed on Sara with an unreadable expression. "Changed your mind about being social?" Sara asked wryly. Bella's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, but otherwise she remained still. That afternoon, Sara decided they both needed air. She approached Bella cautiously with the leash, speaking in the low, firm tone she had once used during their patrols. "Heel, Bella." The command hung in the air between them. For a moment, Sara saw a flicker of the old Bella, the slight tension in the muscles, the instinctive readiness to obey. Then it vanished, replaced by that now familiar wariness. Still, Bella allowed Sara to clip the leash to her collar without resistance. The forest surrounding the cabin was peaceful, the air crisp with the scent of pine and approaching autumn. Sara walked slowly, mindful of her own lingering limp, another souvenir from that final night on duty. Bella followed a few steps behind, neither pulling ahead with her former enthusiasm nor dragging reluctantly. They reached a small clearing overlooking the lake, and Sara sat on a fallen log. To her surprise, Bella settled nearby, not close enough to touch, but closer than she had been since arriving. "I'm sorry," Sara said quietly, looking out over the water rather than at the dog. "I should have fought harder to keep you." I was too wrapped up in my own pain to think about what you might be going through. Bella's ear flicked in Sara's direction. I don't know if we can fix this, Sara continued, her voice threatening to break. But I'm willing to try if you are. As if in response, Bella turned her head toward the trees, her body suddenly alert. A moment later, Sara heard it too. The crack of a branch, followed by rustling leaves. Someone was approaching. Instinctively, Sara reached for the gun she no longer carried. Beside her, Bella had risen to her feet, her posture transforming in an instant. This was the K-9 officer Sara remembered, focused, attentive, prepared. A figure emerged from the trees, a hiker, his hands raised apologetically when he saw them. Sorry to startle you, he called. Just passing through. Sara nodded tensely, watching as the man skirted the clearing and continued down the trail. When she looked back at Bella, the dog had relaxed somewhat, but remained standing, her eyes tracking the hiker until he disappeared from view. Something had changed. In that brief moment of perceived threat, Bella had reverted to her training. Somewhere inside this damaged animal, the police dog still existed. That night, Bella accepted food from Sara's hand and lay not in the corner, but in the middle of the room. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. The scream tore Sara from sleep. For a disorienting moment, she thought it was her own, another night terror that left her gasping and sweat-soaked. Then she realized the sound was coming from Bella. The German shepherd thrashed on her bed, legs running against phantom enemies, whimpers escalating to wounded howls. Sara approached cautiously, knowing from her own experiences how dangerous it could be to wake someone, human or canine, from the grip of a nightmare. Bella, she called softly, keeping her distance. Bella, wake up. You're safe. The dog's eyes snapped open, wild with fear. Before Sara could react, Bella lunged, teeth bared. Sara stumbled backward, falling hard against the coffee table as Bella scrambled to her feet, still caught in the limbo between dream and reality. It's Sara, she said firmly, fighting to keep her voice steady. Stand down, officer. The command, one she had used countless times during their service, seemed to penetrate the fog of Bella's panic. The German shepherd froze, her breathing ragged, eyes gradually clearing as she recognized her surroundings. Sara remained on the floor, her heart pounding. This was what Reynolds had warned her about, the unpredictable reactions, the trauma responses that made Bella difficult. This was what had kept other families from adopting her, what had nearly condemned her to euthanasia. Slowly, Bella approached, her head lowered. She stopped just short of Sara and sank to the ground, a soft whine escaping her throat. An apology, perhaps, or simply confusion. It's okay, Sara whispered, cautiously extending her hand. I get them too. That night marked a turning point. Sara dragged her mattress into the living room, placing it near Bella's bed. When the nightmares came, for either of them, they were no longer alone. Days turned into weeks. The routine they established was simple. Mornings spent on increasingly longer walks around the property. Afternoons dedicated to reintroducing basic commands and rebuilding trust. Evenings by the fire as autumn's chill descended on the mountains. Sara found herself talking to Bella, at first just simple commands and reassurances, then longer conversations about their shared past, the memories that haunted them both, and eventually her hopes for their future. Bella might not understand the words, but she responded to the tone, gradually spending more time at Sara's side rather than maintaining her defensive distance. The first time Bella voluntarily rested her head on Sara's lap, tears sprang to Sara's eyes. It was such a small gesture, one that would have been commonplace in their former life, but now it felt monumental. Good girl, Sara whispered, gently stroking the graying fur between Bella's ears. The German shepherd sighed contentedly, her eyes drifting closed. That night, Sara's phone rang, a rare occurrence that startled them both. It was Reynolds, checking in. How's it going with Bella? he asked, his tone suggesting he expected the worst. "We're making progress," Sara replied, watching as Bella pressed against her leg, seeking reassurance from the sudden noise. "It's not easy, but we're figuring it out together." There was a pause. "That's good to hear. You know, the department's been asking about you too, Sara. The new chief wants to expand the K9 training program. They could use someone with your experience, even part-time." Sara's hand tightened around the phone. "I'm not ready for that, Reynolds." "Maybe not today," he conceded. "But think about it. Not all wounds heal in isolation." After hanging up, Sara sat in silence, Reynolds' words echoing in her mind. Not all wounds heal in isolation. She looked at Bella, now settled back on her bed but watching Sara attentively, attuned to her mood. "What do you think, girl?" Sara asked. "Are we hiding out here, or healing?" Bella's tail thumped once against the floor, her eyes never leaving Sara's face. The explosion shattered the morning quiet. It wasn't an actual explosion, just a hunter's rifle somewhere in the distance. But the effect on Bella was immediate and devastating. The German Shepherd bolted, knocking over a chair and lunging toward the door with such force that the wood splintered around the lock. "Bella, stop!" Sara called, but it was too late. The dog burst through the damaged door and disappeared into the forest, a blur of motion driven by blind panic. Sara grabbed her coat and a flashlight, cursing herself for letting her guard down. They had been making such progress that she'd almost forgotten how fragile their recovery was, how easily trauma could resurface with the right trigger. The forest was vast, densely wooded, and disorienting even to someone familiar with it. Sara called Bella's name until her voice grew hoarse, following what tracks she could find in the soft ground. The light drizzle that had started soon after she set out complicated matters, erasing paw prints and muffling sounds. Hours passed. Sara's leg began to throb, the old injury protesting the unaccustomed exertion, but she pushed forward, dark scenarios playing through her mind. Bella could be anywhere, injured, trapped, or simply too terrified to respond to Sara's calls. As twilight approached, bringing with it a heavier rain and dropping temperatures, Sara's search grew desperate. She had failed Bella once before. She couldn't bear to do it again. That's when she heard it. A faint whimpering coming from beneath a rocky outcropping ahead. Sara approached slowly, her flashlight beam cutting through the gathering darkness to reveal Bella wedged into a small space between the rocks, her body trembling violently. "Hey girl," Sara said softly, crouching a few feet away. "It's okay. You're safe now." Bella's wide eyes fixed on Sara, but she made no move to come out. Her breathing was rapid, shallow, a classic panic response that Sara recognized all too well. Sara settled on the wet ground, ignoring the cold seeping through her clothes. "I'm not leaving without you," she said firmly. "So we can sit here all night if that's what you need." She began to talk, her voice low and steady, recounting stories from their time together. The successful search for a lost child in the mountains, the drug bust that had earned them both commendations, the quiet moments between calls when Bella would rest her head on Sara's lap in the patrol car. Gradually, Bella's breathing slowed. The trembling subsided. When Sara cautiously extended her hand, palm up, Bella stretched her neck forward to sniff it. "Come," Sara commanded gently, using the familiar hand signal that had once been part of their daily communication. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with painstaking slowness, Bella crawled forward until she emerged from her hiding place. She didn't approach Sara immediately but stood on unsteady legs, shaking off the rain from her coat. Sara waited, hardly daring to breathe. This was a turning point. She could feel it. Either Bella would come to her willingly, reconnecting the bond that had been broken, or she would run again, retreating further into her trauma. "Bella," Sara whispered, "come home." The German Shepherd took one step forward, then another. When she finally reached Sara, she didn't just accept the touch. She pressed her body against Sara's leg, the way she used to when they faced danger together on patrol. Relief washed over Sara as she clipped the leash to Bella's collar. "Let's go home, partner." The walk back was slow, both of them exhausted from the ordeal. By the time the cabin came into view, the rain had stopped and stars were beginning to appear in the clearing sky. As Sara repaired the damaged door, Bella watched from her bed, calmer now but still alert. The incident had shaken them both, exposing the fragility of their progress. But it had also revealed something else, a resilience, a determination to overcome that they both still possessed. That night, for the first time, Bella didn't sleep on her designated bed. Instead, she climbed onto Sara's mattress, circling 3 times before settling against her side, her warmth a comfort in the chilly cabin. Sara lay awake long after Bella had fallen asleep, her mind revisiting Reynolds's offer. Perhaps it was time to stop hiding, to face the world again, not as the officers they once were, but as the survivors they had become. 6 months later, Sara stood at the entrance to the Colorado K-9 Rehabilitation Center, watching as Bella trotted alongside a young girl in a wheelchair. The German Shepherd moved with careful precision, matching her pace to the chair's movements, stopping when the girl stopped, offering a supportive presence that the child clearly treasured. "She's a natural," Reynolds said, joining Sara by the fence. "Who would have thought that your battle-scarred partner would become such an effective therapy dog?" Sara smiled, pride warming her chest. She always did excel at reading people. Now she's just using that skill differently. The center had been Sara's idea, a place where retired police dogs could be rehabilitated and retrained for new roles, where traumatized animals and humans could heal together. When she'd finally returned Reynolds's call 3 months ago, she hadn't wanted to rejoin the force. Instead, she'd proposed this program, using her pension and a department grant to transform an old training facility into something entirely new. "The department's impressed," Reynolds noted. "They're talking about expanding the program, maybe partnering with the VA hospital." Sara nodded, her eyes still on Bella. The German Shepherd had finished her session with the young girl and was now approaching them, her stride confident, her eyes clear and alert, so different from the traumatized animal who had trembled in Sara's cabin corner. "She saved me, you know," Sara said quietly. "I was drowning in that cabin, going under a little more each day. Bringing her back forced me to surface too." Reynolds squeezed her shoulder. "You saved each other. That's what partners do." As Bella reached them, Sara knelt to greet her, no longer hindered by her old injury. Physical therapy had improved her mobility almost as much as working at the center had improved her outlook. Bella pressed her nose against Sara's hand, then sat at attention, ready for the next assignment. "What do you think, girl?" Sara asked, scratching behind Bella's ears. "Ready to help train the new recruits?" Bella's tail wagged enthusiastically, a far cry from the single, hesitant wag she'd offered on that rainy day when they'd been reunited. Later that evening, as they walked the perimeter of the center, a habit formed during their policing days that neither had entirely abandoned, Sara reflected on their journey. They would always carry the scars of their final mission, both physical and psychological. The nightmares still came occasionally, though less frequently now. Loud noises could still make Bella flinch, and Sara sometimes found herself scanning rooftops during routine outings. But they had found purpose again, not in spite of their wounds, but because of them. Their shared trauma had become a bridge not just between them, but extending to others who were struggling with their own battles. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the training yard, Bella suddenly tensed beside Sara. But it wasn't fear that straightened the German Shepherd's posture. It was alertness, the professional focus that had made her such an exceptional police dog. Sara followed Bella's gaze to the tree line, where a young deer had emerged to graze in the fading light. Once such a sight might have triggered Bella's prey drive or hunting instincts. Now, she simply watched, her head tilted with curiosity. "Stand down, officer," Sara said softly, the old command now a gentle reminder rather than a necessity. Bella relaxed, glancing up at Sara with what could only be described as contentment. They continued their walk, side by side, two warriors who had found their way back from the battlefield. Not to the life they had known before, but to something new, equally meaningful, and perhaps even more profound. They had both been broken by the same night, the same violence, and in finding each other again, they had discovered that some things, once shattered, could be rebuilt stronger at the broken places. If this story of healing and second chances touched your heart, please consider supporting your local animal shelters and K9 retirement organizations. Many service animals need homes after their working years, and many veterans and former officers struggle with the same issues Sara faced. Together, we can help both humans and animals find their path to recovery. Subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with someone who appreciates stories of courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their K9 companions. Thank you for being part of this journey.